Let me start with the first question. How important, oh, and by the way, Charles, you had asked a question,
yes, sir,
and we will address it in the panel, okay? Yeah, so I didn't forget the question. So, but the first question is, how important and urgent is it today to work on improving transparency of NGOs? We will have a particular focus on foundations in this discussion and overall. So, but how important is it? Zsuzsa, ladies first. If you take the microphone and turn it on and off because we have some feedback.
Thank you. I think it's not only today, but it has always been extremely urgent to focus on transparency. AmCham has always carried the flag to promote transparency. Right from the beginning, at the startup phase of AmCham, charity was managed through a committee like any other similar ones. By the time we reached the level of income, which was more than 7 million forint, we decided to make it a bit more see-through, and we changed the legislation form of our presence, and since 2001 we act as a foundation. We narrowed down our scope of activity to children in need. What does it mean? The need can be financial or healthcare. And we decided to play the bridge in between the donors and the beneficiaries. Our donors are the members of AmCham, so we serve their desire to do charity, and in companies who do not have enough manpower, we take over that role. As they sign the code of ethics of AmCham, we have a kind of security on that transparency. At the beginning, we had an aim back of our mind that we wanted to become the role model for the society. At the other end is the beneficiary, who are the NGOs who have the need to help. We created a template which is easy for them to apply for the tenders. And it gives us in the board also the chance to see their historic activity and have a view on that professionalism in the given field. And not only that, before we select the winner of a particular project, we go and personally visit the facilities, and we have a personal experience as well. So I believe that is what we have done right from the beginning to focus on transparency.
So maybe Tamás, if we could start here.
Thank you. Does it work? So thank you. I think it's very timely and very urgent, but before I say why, I think I can't have to turn out to be the worst nightmare of a panel to say a couple additional sentences. I was very inspired by Mr. Tillemans' presentation, especially by the fact that when you want to change the world, you start at home. You don't go out telling others what they should be doing, but what they did was they went to the treasury and tried to work at home, tried to change there, and did change. And this kind of thought, I would like to have it in presence in all my answers, because the change starts with us, with our action. So going back to CZIRJÁK Junior's drawing on related to DEZ, cow and neighbor, I think what it means to Hungarians doesn't matter how I am doing, as long as my neighbor is doing worse. And I think in a way, I find that represents fairly well the approach to transparency of the NGOs. You know, we always say we are not doing too bad, but look at the government, look at the business sector. They are even worse than us. And my question is, why do we put up with this? Why do we accept this kind of mediocre place? I think we shouldn't. And the stress is on we, because we are, I believe all of us, one way or other, making up the non-profit sector, as trustees, as volunteers, as supporters, as full-time foundation employees. So I think it's time to work, and it's time to start the change with us.
Just one quick comment on this. In my experience in the past, in the recent years, I think there are two actors, the NGO participants and the corporate partners. So alone, we cannot do any changes. So I believe that if we start and continue a conversation, a dialogue, a partnership, that will happen on this issue. That will help on this issue.
So, sorry, just to put the question up again to hit. Is it urgent now, transparency? Everybody's saying yes, but do you want to just add to that a little bit more, Tamás?
As Zsuzsa mentioned earlier, it's always been an issue. I think we have to act right now. We don't have to wait more.
Yes, so I would like to join what you have said and absolutely agree with the fact that we need to make it more transparent. And why I think we really need to act now is that, and I really agree with you, there is a lot of philanthropy in Hungary. It's not that long ago, actually 1 year ago, remember the snowstorms 1 year ago, how thousands and 10,000s of people have immediately dropping everything, started helping each other in Hungary without even thinking of any reward. It's not that much more longer ago when the Red Mud catastrophe was. People started donating huge amounts of money because they knew where it would go to. The same happened a year ago when the Danube was flooding. Thousands of people were putting sand sacks everywhere next to the Danube and helping. So I think there is a lot of philanthropy in Hungary, it just needs to be channeled right. And what can we do to channel these efforts? I think we need to make the NGO sector transparent, because people will only, since there's such big lack of trust in institutions in Hungary, we've already touched upon, I think that the NGO sector will only be transparent and successful if it's transparent, and we need transparency to build trust.
Great. Let me go to the next question. And again, in the audience, we can come back to these issues if you have a question, so collect your question. What can we, as trustees and leaders of NGOs, do to strengthen public confidence in our work? And specifically, generally, and then specifically about fundraising. Zsuzsa?
That is always a question when we turn to the donors. Why should I give the donation exactly to you? And to give the answer to them, we have to be very specific and insist on our main focus. We in the curatorium decided that we never ever select a beneficiary without tendering the project. We always issue tenders even in these emergency cases when we have to deal with projects related to the victims of flood or fire. We always issue a tender. The tender is always evaluated by volunteers, independent ones. Usually the ones come back who were the winners from the previous year charity grant. We have our traditional Thanksgiving charity. These volunteers are very essential for us because without them we really cannot operate, we don't have staff. We also have to recognize them, and that gives also an attraction to the future donors if they see who were supporting our activity, who were supporting our transparency activity. And I think with this, we have permanent supporters each and every year.
my answer, I would like to refer to another sort of Hungarian phenomenon, which says, you know, I'm a small guy, you know, there's a big system here that works against me, I can't do much. And I think it's not true. We can do a lot as trustees and leaders of organizations. And I would like to list 3 very specific things when it comes to transparency and fundraising. First of all, we should educate our donors. We should let them know that we don't only need money for flashy and sexy projects, but we need to cover costs that help us to be transparent. We need a bookkeeper, we need lawyers, we need to produce reports, we need to be accountable, and maybe they are not visible activities, but very important to maintain public confidence in our work. The second thing is related again to this, and that is we should publish annual reports. I would like to sort of mention the trend that I'm noticing, that a lot of organizations produce the so-called public benefit report, the közhasznúsági jelentés, which is required by some to maintain this status. But if you look at them, they are not the sort of report that you would like to give your potential donor and say, look, this is what we have done last year, this is what we achieved, this is how we used the money. And I think we need to change that. We need to change that. We need to produce annual reports that are understandable to the general public, so that you don't have to be an accountant to understand how that organization spend the money. The third thing is again about annual reports. I think we should ask from our NGO partners for their annual report, to let them know that we are interested in their work, to let them know that there is a demand for annual reports, which is, I think, is a key tool to achieve transparency.
I agree with Tamás. United Way follows these practices, but I think there is a fourth pillar. I would say that it's a massive communication to the public. In the internet age, I experienced that we have to publicize our results, our community impact, our programs to the people. We have to be visible. Let's make sure that the public know about our programs, our missions, and give them the access to come to us and ask. So be a little bit more open than maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Yes, thank you. So coming back to the original question was, what can the board members do, board of trustees or directors of an association or foundation? I don't want to go ahead to the discussion about on the donors panel, but it will basically come up that some bigger donors actually do a small due diligence on the subject of their charitable donations. And I think this is what should not be required from donors, because there are a lot of donors out there who do not have the means, neither the time nor the means to conduct such a due diligence procedure on their subjects. And this is why I really think that transparency will be that transparency is the best tool to enhance and improve donations in Hungary, because as of now, associations and foundations do have to publish, of course, annual reports, and that is visible to donors, but they can't understand it. It's a very technical, a very dry publication on what they're doing, but donors do not understand it, and it doesn't explain to them if the money they're donating is actually used for the purposes they want it to be used for.
It's interesting. I'll just make a comment here on the last two questions. I heard of a study some years ago. I don't know if it's valid anymore, but it's interesting. There are about 50,000 not-for-profit organizations in Hungary, something like that. And someone told me there was a study, academic study done, that only 1/3 were actually conducting activities of a civil society nature. Interesting. And then the other point I just wanted to make is of course, now we're talking about transparency, but really in anything, in business or foundation work and other places, you need to have, as Tamás FÜZESY said, you need to have an impact. You have to show the emotional side, right? You have to show results that you're actually achieving something. You can't just be transparent. I hope transparency will be the movie ticket. In other words, unless you have it, you can't operate. But then you also have to be a good foundation. You have to make an impact. Anyway, think about that. Again, we're going to have recommendations at the end. We'd like to talk to you about it and exchange. Maybe you have a different idea, this different business model concept. Let me go to the third question. Should we expect NGOs to be run professionally? Should we apply the same liability standards to NGO trustees, board members, as in the private business? Interesting. Zsuzsa.
Absolutely. Our founder in 2001 secured the diversity within the Board of Trustees in the AmCham Foundation, that we have most of the knowledge in-house available to what a professional company requires to take decisions like legal, financial, sales and management. Whatever we do not have, we have the lucky position that we serve the members of AmCham. And here we have the diversity of all these knowledge-based companies who give us volunteer advice. Of course, it has one difficulty or challenge, that each and every advisor is doing it once, because they take the time away from their daily activity, so we do not have their service regularly. But the in-house knowledge is always available to cope with all the changes of regulations around in Hungary, in our world. So we count on the support of the members as well. I guess the answer is it has to be managed, and the players have to be liable for whatever they impact.
Yes, I think we should expect all NGOs to run professionally. I also think that the professionalism manifests itself differently for different organizations, depending on their budget, depending on the circumstances and resources they command. I think for me what is important that I would expect from any organization, be it small or big, to have a good understanding of the field they are working on, to have a fairly clear sense of mission. What is it that they try to achieve? I also think, as Tamás said, I would expect them to be able to communicate, to tell the people, to tell their audience what is it they try to do, and of course report back to that audience. What is it they have done? I think how it is actually put into practice depends on the organization itself. But I think this is, for me, applies to all NGOs. As for the same standards, I think as a sort of departing principle, I agree with it. At the same time, I think the details can be different, and in some ways I understand that the legislation that is coming into effect in the mid of March actually has some quite negative consequences to foundations. And when we come to that, I think it would be very worth discussing it, because the sector may need support to change that and to advocate for changing that.
I'll share my personal experience in the last 10 years. 10 years ago I started to work for Bátortábor. We were 3 in the office. We did not have camp, and we did not have well-designed programs. And my task was to build up these 3 major pillars. 5 years later, when I left Bátortábor, we had a $3 million campsite, 33 employees and a well-audited and designed program. But the point is that the reason I left Battle Tower, and it refers to professionalism, I had my challenge. I'm a builder. I like challenges. But when we achieved our goals, the management, the organization needed another type of leader. Someone who can sell, someone who can raise funds better. And then we made a good transfer. And I came to United Way because at that time, United Way started its own first program, which is child safety. So that was 3 years ago, and we really built up a good program. It's running very well now. But we realized that that is not enough. So we made a little research last year with our partners. We looked at the statistics in Hungary and the European Union, and then we come up some other topics, other issues or other causes we will probably support in the future. So the flexibility of the organization and the staff on the board level and on the operation level is very important to see the challenges and be professional. Choose your right colleagues on different positions are essential.
Yes, thank you. So my thoughts on this are that there, first of all, needs to be made a very clear distinction. We're not saying, or I'm not saying that NGOs need to be run by professionals. I say they need to be run professionally. And the big difference here is that it's a question of size. We're not saying that every NGO, as small as it can be, let's talk about a grassroots organization, needs to be run by professionals. But what we think, and what is really important, is that the organization and their leaders should remain liable and accountable. Because liability and accountability give the NGO the possibility to stand up from its mistakes, to start with a clean slate. Because no matter how big and professionally run an organization is, mistakes will always happen. But if donors know that the leaders who make these mistakes are accountable for their mistakes, the organization will have the possibility to stand up, to restart with a clean slate, as I said. So I think this is the basic principle. Accountability and liability are means to give the NGO the possibility to overcome the mistakes it made.
Excellent. I think this one's dead. Is that good? Okay. Next question. I have 2 more questions. This one and 1 more. What could the main regulatory change, and let me not going to change the script here, even change, be that would facilitate the everyday operation of NGOs?
I believe auditing is an important element. Today's regulatory rules, foundations below a certain income are not obliged or it's not mandatory to have regular audits. What we in AmCham do, of course, every year for the General Assembly, there is a yearbook issued, and we present our activity words and not only with financial figures, but we share our projects and experiences in the calendar year. So all our members who are our donors know what we have done. We also, in our foundation, from time to time, use auditing companies to do the audit for us, and we get professional result, and we pay for that audit. So I would highly recommend that we promote the idea of auditing to more foundations.
Well, I will be very short since I'm not a legal expert, but I would like to remind those who are in charge of creating regulations to respect the principle and to facilitate the main principle of non-profits, which is that there are vehicles for people to do good. I think whatever regulation facilitates that, I'm fine with that. If something, you know, works against it, I think we should really think about changing that.
Yes, thank you. I think that when we're talking about administrative requirements put to NGOs, I think we can distinguish between two basic categories. One are those which facilitate and enhance transparency, say auditing and reporting obligations. In this respect, I don't think that too much easing should be made in this sector from a regulatory standpoint, because I believe that I think that NGOs should consider reporting obligations to be a tool. It is not an obligation towards the state, but it's a tool of transparency to provide information to our donors. This is one point. The other is all the rest, let's call them corporate, incorporating or changing something of the statute. Now, this used to be, and sorry to put it this plain, but this used to be a pain recently and still is. I believe that it shouldn't take 6 to 12 months for an educated lawyer to incorporate an association or foundation. There have been some very good initiatives in the Hungarian legislation, say templates, for example. The Hungarian procedural law on incorporation of associations contains a provision which says that if they are established by the use of a template, then the court has to incorporate it within 15 days. Fact is, these templates have never been introduced, and the possibility has been in the law for 3 years. So I think there are a lot of good possibilities here to ease the functioning and operation of NGOs, but they need to be implemented.
These things you're talking about, Ms. Ravi, these are, for the corporate sector, these exist, right?
Yes, of course, they do.
They don't exist for the non-for-profit sector?
No, they don't.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Yeah, this is especially interesting if we're looking at the recent developments in liability, which are almost the same for the NGO sector as for the corporate sector. So what we're having is almost identical liability standards, but a much less secure legal environment they're operating in.
And how long does it take to change a board member in a foundation?
I think the directions already give an answer. Well, I'd say the best case scenario is 2 to 3 months, generally 6 to 8 months, and the worst case is, I don't even want to say it. What in the corporate sector, even in the worst case, you get it registered within a month, and you manage your director's say.
And what else can we do on the tax side? We'll talk about that later too, but there were some ideas I think that we discussed, no?
Yes, well, obviously we have talked about, especially in the working group, a lot about taxes. Part of supporting the NGO sector is, of course, encouraging donations. If we look at the recent developments or the developments of the last 5 to 8 years, we see that the tax burden on donations has become extremely high, especially for private individuals. In fact, donations by private individuals are absolutely non-deductible. This means that there is simply, except for philanthropy, no incentive to people to donate.
It's amazing. I just heard last night Dr. Tillerman said that in some countries in the region, if an opera singer sings and gives a benefit concert, that all donations to civil society, according to the law of that country, are subject to VAT. So anyone buying an opera ticket, a ticket to go see the opera singer, the foundation then is burdened with paying VAT. It's amazing. So tax is also important, but I'm sure Peter and Vitso will talk about that in the next panel as well. Last question I have for the panel then is, what can we do together? And I also want to use this to reflect on your comment. There was this NGO certification, I believe, you just mentioned. But what can we do together?
Training, training, and training. I think it's the most important element for all the participants, but basically to the civil society. We are confronted in each and every year that there are more NGOs in need than the ones who are aware of the listings of various projects. They do not know who to contact. They have the need, but we cannot find them. So we have to train the society for that. And also, if they know that there are projects listed, they do not have the in-house professional knowledge to phrase it clear what they need. If they would phrase it properly, it would be easier for us also to collect the sponsorships, the donations from our members. And also it's important for us to have a clear statement, because if they are the winners, we as AmCham Foundation, we contract the deal. At the end of the year, these NGOs come back to us with their experiences, their implementation, the result of the use of the fund which they got from us. And this also provides us an ongoing relation with the ones who we have supported in the last 25 years. Even if I look around in the room, I find several of the NGOs who we supported. So, training, training, training.
Yes, so I must absolutely agree, training. Obviously there are regulatory changes which we could implement, which I think have been very well pronounced in the recent years, because these are not new problems. But yes, training. And here I'd like to congratulate NIOK for all its efforts they're doing in the civil sector, because this is what they're actually doing, if I'm not mistaken. They're providing training, they're providing information to people in the NGO sector or willing to enter the NGO sector on what to do and how to become transparent. And as part of this, I don't want to talk about what you're probably going to talk about, but I think, for example, your Code of Ethics initiative is also very good. So I'd like to pass over the mic now.
Robbie, you started talking about what I wanted to talk about a little bit, but first I would like to say that so far I focused on individuals, what we can do individually. But at the same time, I think we have to realize that this is a task that we can only approach with a fair chance of success together. You know, because this is a country where regulations are important, but almost the norm is not to follow the regulations. So what we are against here is to change the mentality, to change the approach of people, to make them believe that this is important, to be transparent. And in that sense, I think for me the line is, you know, individually we fall, together we have a chance. And the code of ethical fundraising that Róbert mentioned is a clear example so far that, you know, this is we developed it together with 7 major organizations, including Gyermekfalu, SOS Gyermekfalu, and it is used by the Hungarian government as a basic standard to monitor transparency. It is hailed as a good example by the USAID Sustainability Index, yet only 7 organizations signed it. And we can talk about why it was not signed. I think from our point we are not attached to our initiatives. What I'm trying to say and underline that we are open to work with all of you to create some kind of principle, because we believe that in addition to the regulations, we have to have some sort of self-regulation and convince society that this is a value that benefits us all, even on the midterm. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Just thinking of my son's picture. Questions from the audience. I'm sure you have them. Everybody got up early this morning to be here. So yes, there's one in the back. Could we have the microphone over there? We'll take one back there just because it's being taped, and I'd love to have this content available for academia later.
Thank you very much. I have a loyalist question. I do know that law does not solve many problems, but given the fact that we have also made comments related to law, and if I understood correctly, you referred to the new civil code of Hungary, and exactly because of that, what do you think about the novelty which was introduced now, and that is basically a sort of trust. Trust, as you may know, a legal institution which was known and has played an important role only in common law systems, and now we have some kind of trust being introduced in Hungary. In my perception, that could be one of the possible solutions for solving transparency issues, but of course you have a number of question marks.
Thank you. Anybody who would like to?
So, in the current context, I don't think that the introduction of trusts will bring any big advancements to the NGO sector, because the regulatory model the new Hungarian Civil Code follows as regards to trusts is rather the typical American kind of trust, where the family wealth is distributed in some kind. I honestly, as of now, obviously this is something brand new and we don't know how people will use it, but as of now, I don't see that this will have any either positive or negative influence on the NGO sector.
Yes, question up here in front.
Well, thank you. It's not a question, it's a comment, but following...
Introduce yourself.
I'm Veronica Mora from the Hungarian Environmental Partnership Foundation. And actually, following up on that issue, I think another point that is very painfully missing from the Hungarian legislation that will help philanthropy is the regulation of foundation endowment. This concept is non-existent in Hungarian law, and therefore there are no incentives for potential donors to provide support or for donation to foundation endowments. And without endowed foundations, there would be no independent philanthropic segment in the Hungarian environment, and for that reason NGOs would remain dependent on state, private or foreign funding and donations.
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of work in this development of trusts and endowments question. I absolutely agree with you. And the new code, there is this foundation and trust concept, but I've been to presentations from your colleagues and and it's not working yet in the way. There's so many questions. I think the struggle in Hungary is yes, this dependency on two things. One is foreign support, and second is government support. In fact, I've seen it go in the direction of where foundations are only doing training based on government grants, away from their original charge, their original mission, just to survive. Taking the United Way example, in Romania, United Way Romania was able to achieve an endowment because of certain tax law situations that allowed that to happen. Here it's not been that way, and I agree with you, it's unfortunate. How do we break out of it is the question. What do we recommend? So please, if you have a suggestion.
Well, we have more than a suggestion. We actually made a concept, a legal concept for how to introduce and how to provide tax incentives for foundation endowment. And we've been lobbying for that throughout the preparation of the new civil code, which was a more than decade-long process. And in the previous one, which was almost passed by the parliament in 2009, our concept in a modified way, but it's found its way. But that version of the new civil code never entered into force. and in the new one that is going to enter into force tomorrow, we didn't have such luck with our advocating efforts.
Well, let's work together and have an impact. Eva, next question. Unless someone has a comment now.
My name is Eva Koczer, I am the head of the Magic Lamp Csodalampa Foundation. I would like just to give some comments partly to László. No, don't worry. Actually, as you heard, we have been working on the NGO position paper for quite a long time. You mentioned the figure that approximately 50,000 NGOs have been working, let's say have been working in Hungary. And you doubt that what the others are doing, because actively working are really next to, I would say, 20,000. In my opinion, quite a number of NGOs are who are not actively working in a way related to schools or kindergartens. And actually, for them, transparency, for us, transparency in these cases is very easy, because everybody knows going to the kindergarten or school and helping to these foundations, that they are rather transparent, as you know that they are spending your sponsorship, let's say, or the money on toys or something like it, what is necessary for their activity. I am also in the board of the DEZSnomn Foundation, so I can see that you must educate them, because unfortunately, they cannot follow what is normal, in my opinion, what is, for example, written in the civil law. That, for example, by the 31st of May this year, you have to turn to the court and you have to give, what is alapítókéret in English, sorry. Sorry. That they have to give it to the court, and the court has to decide whether you will be staying közhasznú, but used to be kiemelt közhasznú. Yeah, a public benefit revenue, and or not. And actually, in our case, we are very lucky, because last year we already did it, and it took approximately 8 to 9 months in our case to get the answer from the court. So this is for education. The other thing is concerning trust, that we have been talking here about trust between companies and the other sectors, but unfortunately we tend to forget that for private persons trust actually has been lost recently completely. As you know, unfortunately there is again a decline concerning the 1% campaign. I mean, who they really afford their 5 minutes to give the 1% to any NGO organization. We were just making some studies with PricewaterhouseCoopers that approximately 30% of the people do give their 1%, what is, in my opinion, a very, very negative trend and very sad. And unfortunately, I just didn't ask Mr. Tillman one question, but you know already. That we have been, in a way, trying to find ways how a ranking institute or board would be set up in Hungary, next to NIOK, of course, what would help, in a way, trust for everybody. But unfortunately, it costs a lot of money, a lot of time, not just free time, not just volunteer work, because it costs really a lot of money. And we could probably ask him later on how he could imagine how we could attract companies and people to help to set up such an institute.
Comments, please?
Maybe just coming back to this idea of 20,000 out of 50,000. For once, this is an interesting figure, because a big majority of these foundations and associations are in fact dead. What happens is it is so painful and such a long process to wind up an association and foundation that people just don't care. They just put it to sleep, and then either the state terminates the foundation or not. So this is one reason for this very high number. And this also leads me to my second comment, which is that what we see in Hungary, and this is why education is very important, that there are a lot of good initiatives with a lot of inertia. But as soon as the foundation or the charitable organization loses that inertia provided by the founder who started out the idea, they just die away because they're not professionally managed, they're not taught, they don't have the proper education on how to run a foundation once it becomes big enough to sustain itself, to sustain its operations, and that's it. So I think part of education should be succession planning within the organizations so that they can be sustainable, and if they're sustainable, then I think donors are also more encouraged to donate because they know that whatever they're giving their money to will operate on the long term.
I'll make a related comment because I think actually in the growth where accountability and transparency comes to play very importantly. I represented in my other capacity an organization which is very local. You know, it's based in the 9th district. It's called the Ferencváros Community Foundation, and we were actually considering to join this code for ethical fundraisers or fundraising organizations. And I was, as a NIOK trustee, I tried to advocate for joining, but my colleagues voted against me, saying, but you know, all our donors know us. And that's true, you know, they know us because that's the principle of the organization. We raise money locally. If somebody doesn't know me or my board member, then he knows somebody who knows the board member, and it's easy to check whether we are working and how do we use money. And that's true, but the situation is changing. Why? Because we are growing, because we are trying to step out of that circle who know us. You know, if you're familiar a little bit with the 9th district, there is this nice Danube bank with very big companies who are, we believe, potential donors to us, but nobody knows us. Nobody knows the trustees. They ask us, okay, but tell us, how do we know that you are doing a good work? And I think that's where these kind of structures like ethical principles and other brands that speak beyond an organization become important.
I just want to add to what Eva said as well, and what you just said. We all sat together with Zsuzsa and Pricewaterhouse, and said, what can we do? And what we were trying to do originally was say, okay, let's do a charity navigator kind of approach. Now, I don't know if anybody knows this. It's a foundation in the U.S. which was founded not by other foundations, but is an independently funded foundation. And what they do is give a rating to agencies, to foundations, and you know, foundations are proud to have it on their website. Actually, even United Way, which has 2,000 United Ways in the U.S., everybody wants to have a good rating from Charity Navigator. The thing is, how they do their work is rely on tax filings, which are very quantitative, and they have certain measures and blah, 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 and it's all publicly available. So the subjectivity is not there. Now, NGO certification, I don't know. Can we come up with that business model? NIOK has something.
NGO management.
Okay, that too, for training even, sure, that's part of it, users. Anyway, that's kind of where we're at in draft thinking.
And considering the fact that obviously people are probably not willing to donate, you know, to give the 1% that they can to NGOs, that leads me to a question how the NGOs in Hungary, or if there is any plan, how NGOs in Hungary can maybe get closer to the general population, because the numbers are important for the donors, the transparency and everything, but also maybe to have a good connection with the society and Hungarians who are maybe not professionals, but maybe to know what NGOs are doing and to have enough information, maybe to become part of their lives. Thank you.
Let's answer this from the foundation perspective, because I'm sure Peter will deal with this from the donor perspective.
Yes, Communication, that's the first thing. Especially, as I mentioned, during the internet age, the social media is very, very important. But foundations need professionals on the staff. That means communication experts. And of course, there is not NGO, or maybe there is now, but non-profit communication studies in universities. So what I see that communication experts come from the for-profit sector, as well as sales experts or marketing experts. Because they maybe get frustrated in the for-profit sector and they want to see something work, something better. That is very important to have the right staff, the communication department, I would say, in the NGO, in the organization, and make sure they know how to do the best, what to do, what are the best channels. Of course, this takes money. Funds. We have to pay for the staff, we have to probably pay for the advertisement spaces, but in my experience, the funds is limited in this area. Of course, we like to spend the money, the donations. Money is not the best word, the donations or the funds for the purposes, for the mission, for communication, but we have to as far as I know, it's about 10% of the budget must go in communication.
Well, yes, Tamás, I agree with the communication. That's what we do every year when we announce the winner of the certain project. We go to the countryside in the given region, and for the handing out of the donation, we invite the media, we invite the press, and we try to communicate our activity to make it public in the region. Also, we have a dream that maybe there is a company who is operating in the region, and they could do the follow-up activity with the NGO who was the winner in that particular year. And if the employees meet the NGO management, then automatically they will easier think about the 1% that, hey, I could use it and I could help these NGOs to have a better life. Because those NGOs, in our case, are always dealing with children, and most of the employees have a relation in one way or another to children needs. So communication and marketing, if you call it PR, is essential.
I just want to say that agreeing with that and adding to that, that I think that it has to be diversified. You know, at the local level, as I said, I think, you know, face-to-face discussions are probably the best. You know, and in Ferencváros, which is a community of 60,000 people, it's quite a big, but it's still possible. It's still possible to do that. At the same time, in a different capacity, I'm also leading a program, actually, supported by the Norwegian Embassy, where it's a national program. You have to have good content, and you have to have professional communicators. You know, your website has to be absolutely up to scratch. You know who is your target group, you know how to reach them, and you have to keep on working them. And as my colleague said, you have to have money for this. You have to. There's no other way. Because the noise, the electronic noise, is very, very loud.
Okay, in the interest of time, Charles, can you put up your question and then we'll figure out if we answer it or the next panelist?
Well, it goes without saying that NGOs was actually initiated by the United Nations after the Second World War. It took a lifetime, László, practically your lifetime, bring the project from New York to Budapest, which is incredibly quality-oriented work. Thank you very much. What is your opinion and what's the reasoning behind that it took a long time this particular project to arrive East Central European Center project. The other point I would like to make is that it certainly the NGOs transparency is extremely important for accountability and separate the fake NGOs from the real McCoy. One of the finest organizations based upon the survey of Price Waterhouse is your organization, and first of all the International Red Cross organization based in Geneva, where the overhead of expense is only a fraction of the rest of the expense in reference to the NGO activity. The Hungarian market economy is a young market economy, 25 years old, not more than that. The market economy grows up from the bottom to the top. Regulation comes down to the top to the bottom. Well, it takes time to navigate. And that's what they called NAV. Thank you, sir.
Great. With that thought, I think it's a good question. We're going to leave that for the next panels, and we'll come back. We're going to come back to it at the end because we'll pull together the recommendations. I do want to comment on one thing that yeah, there's a lot of. I don't believe NGOs started in Hungary after World War II. I think they've been around for a long time. Okay, whatever. But it's. I think people want to help other people, and some of it's organized and some of it isn't. And the way it's organized is changing. Let's put it that way. So I think we're out of time. The next agenda point is a coffee break, and well deserved. We have scheduled the next panel at 10:45, which is in 5 minutes. So I would suggest we take a 15-minute break. So let's be back here at 10:55. Let's make it 10:54. Okay. Thank you, everybody.